It's a pleasure to welcome you to this new series by the Mexican Consulate in Boston of conversations with Mexican professional leaders in New England. And today, the idea is to showcase how Mexican professionals, academics, scientists are here in Boston and New England contributing to the knowledge, contributing to science, to medicine, and also to the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem of Boston. So it's a pleasure, and this is our first, but we will be doing it the following months, every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. So please, if you're interested to follow us, we hope to continue seeing you. We have also here Paulina, who's in charge of innovation at the consulate, is co-hosting with me this interesting talk. So it's a pleasure to introduce you our two first guests of the series. Mariana Matus, doctor in Mexican biologist. She's a CEO and co-founder of Biobot Analytics. Did I pronounce it well? Yes.
Yes.
Governments tackle the opioid crisis by tracking trends in drug consumption through sewage samples. Dr. Matus obtained her college degree at UNAM and received a master's at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. That I'm sure I didn't say well. Before coming to do her PhD at MIT. And Dr. Guillermo Ulises Ruiz-Esparza from Aguascalientes is a medical doctor that studied at Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico first. He's a BioNanotechnologist and entrepreneur, and he will explain us what a BioNanotechnologist does and means. He currently leads the Molecular Nanosystem Research Group, part of the Harvard-MIT Division of Health Sciences and Technology, and the Division of Engineering and Medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. He has been named a young, very influential Mexican and Latino leader, both in Mexico and the US, and El Mundo CNN expansion, named him one of the most promising Mexican individuals under the age of 40. And that must have been like 10 minutes ago. So I would like to place the first question to both of you. How did it all start? Why are you in Boston? Why coming to the US? How long ago? And what has it been for you in your careers?
Yeah, for me, I did my undergrad in UNAM back in Cuernavaca, and lots of my classmates were going to do grad school abroad, like looking for opportunities to study in other countries. So I was also super curious to experience a different educational system, a different research system, and really to expand my horizons. And, you know, I initially thought I would stay in Europe for my PhD, but ended up having the opportunity to come to MIT and took it. And it's been great. I arrived in Boston already 8 years ago. So I finished my PhD, graduated, started the company, and now established myself here. My husband and I now live here and probably will continue here for a while.
So now you are a Bostonian and a New Englander.
I think so. Yeah, I'm going strong like now for a decade here. So definitely feeling more and more like a second home.
Very good, Mariana. And what about you, Guillermo?
Yeah, so I actually arrived here first in 2011 to Texas. Specifically, I was studying my PhD at Houston Methodist Hospital. I did a PhD there in nanomedicine. And then I spent 3 years after that, I came back a little bit to Mexico.
Guillermo?
Yeah, nanomedicine is a pretty interesting field. It's actually based on nanotechnology. What is nanotechnology? It's the science that allows us to manipulate matter at very tiny scales, even smaller scales than a cell. And then when we can manipulate this matter, we're able to build technology. In the case of nanomedicine, we build technologies for delivering drugs, for example, via nanoparticles, for diagnosing diseases, as we can develop very tiny sensors or nanosensors, or we can even build tissues. We can do tissue engineering with these very small nanomaterials. So that's kind of the area that I've been involved since I was in Texas. Then after finishing my MD and PhD, because I was in this joint program where Monterey Tech actually made this agreement with Houston Methodist Hospital. So that was why I was able to study my PhD there. Then after finishing everything, I actually got a position here first as a postdoc. I arrived to the Harvard MIT program in health sciences and technology, where I train in new different things like bioprinting, micro nanofabrication, and also I was involved in a lot of biomaterial technologies for medical devices. And then afterwards, I stay here in the Harvard MIT division with health science and technology. Dr. Joseph Bobentre, that is the chief of the biomedical engineering division, gave me opportunity to stay. We've been doing now in the group a lot of nanotechnologies to solve various problems, specifically in the heart, also in kidney disease, and a little bit of cancer. And in parallel, I've been also an entrepreneur here in Boston, as I have established a nanotechnology company where we're trying to solve many different problems in various fields. Animal health, for example, not just human health. So we're also based actually in both. We're focusing human, animal, but also we're doing things in cosmetics. We're doing things also related to agriculture, as nanotechnology can be applied in many different areas.
Thank you. So you both became entrepreneurs here in Boston, one of the areas of innovation, but also of lots of competition. So tell us a little bit more about this big step from research and academia to being entrepreneurs. I suppose I know that they nurture each other, but it is totally different. And to become an entrepreneur or have a startup like yours, Mariana, you need to invest and you have to take lots of risk. How was that jump between one area to the other, and how do you feel? And a little bit of what your companies are doing now, not now, because that will be the last part, what you're doing now with COVID, but now in general as entrepreneurs, your experience.
Yeah, I think that, my undergrad education at UNAM was in genome sciences. So I was always very passionate about all of the new tools in biology to engineer genomes, to understand better disease and health through all of the new molecular techniques. But my interest was never to go on and become a professor, like a researcher at a university or institution. I always wanted to be able to solve big problems using science, to really get like a big problem out there and to use science to solve it. That was one of my dreams. So coming into MIT.
That's how you decided and thought of doing your Biobot Analytics?
Yeah. So for me, I guess that next step was the PhD, because I chose to come to MIT because they really nurture you to become an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter if you studied business or science or engineering. Like, if you have a good idea and have the passion to go and start your own company, they give you lots of resources, training, mentorship, so that you can make the transition and stop thinking only as a scientist and be able to expand and also think about how this solves a real problem and becomes a business. So I think that was my next step in the transition. And then finally, the motivation for creating Biobot Analytics is that I think, to me, it's just crazy that, it's 2020 and we know more about, things like the stock market. We know so much more about certain things. And to me, it's just crazy that we don't really have a way to understand and anticipate public health emergencies. To me, it's just still crazy that it's 2020 and we have so much technology available, and we are still surprised by things like COVID that has taken the world entirely by surprise and has locked down entire countries, entire economies. And to me, that's totally preventable. Like, we have the technologies to stay ahead of epidemics, and that was the motivation to create Biobot. We are a public health data science company. We gather information about human health by analyzing molecules in wastewater. Because every time that we flush the toilet, we're actually sending away very valuable medical samples about our health. Stool, urine, basically what we consider waste, actually are a gold mine of information about human health. And so, that is information that we create naturally, organically, every day, and nobody is looking at it. So the mission of the company is to create the technology to extract that information from wastewater and convert it into actionable public health information. And we know that one day this technology will exist in every city and town around the world. And that basically we will be able to always stay ahead of epidemics and never reach this point again. So when we started the company, we addressed the #1 public health priority for the US, which is the opioid epidemic.
But it's interesting, you'll tell us more about how from the opioid, it can go to a more general information on what's going on in the cities. Guillermo, tell us more about you. How was your jump from researcher to entrepreneur? Was it similar to Mariana?
Yeah, I think it was similar, but yeah, I think there's a lot of differences, right? Between doing research in the lab is a totally different story than starting a company, because sometimes in the lab you need to focus a lot in, of course, experiments, in writing grants, making sure you are obtaining the data and that you're making something that is useful for everyone. But then the challenge of how to translate the technologies that you develop in a lab to the real world, it's actually very interesting. And that's how kind of I started to work into this company, to develop the company, to make sure that everything we do in the lab is not going to stay in the lab. It's going to be a vehicle for the innovations to be transferred to the general public. And then, so around a year and a half ago, actually, I started this company with some other people. I have some co-founders in this nanotechnology company, where we're trying to transfer some of the nanotechnologies we have developed for medical applications, specifically some drug delivery systems for cardiovascular disease, for kidney disease, but to some consumer applications that actually it could be pretty interesting for many fields. I'm going to put some examples. We started actually developing some antimicrobial technologies in our company. Specifically, we detected that there was a very big problem in the dairy industry. Around 1/3 of the global milk production is lost, which is kind of terrible. Like losing 1/3 of the global milk production, it's yeah, it's terrible because the people needs the milk, of course. Like in developing countries, is kind of basic for them to produce more food. Also, the farmers are losing globally a lot of money because of these very specific problems. So we realized that some of the technologies that actually were applied in this case to human health could be also modified to be used in animal health and to solve some of the biggest challenges. So we developed this very cool technology to help the farmers. And then, of course, that was one of the first ones we developed. We started transferring those technologies for skin problems, specifically for some skin diseases. I'm talking about like eczema, acne, some of the most common ones. And then those type of applications led us to even cosmetic applications of the nanotechnologies in the skincare market. And then it has been pretty interesting because what we are developing is actually pretty useful for various markets. We call them platform technologies. So we are also exploring multiple different use cases. Right now for COVID, I know that we're going to discuss that. We're also applying some of our technologies. And then it's been a pretty challenging and interesting path, because learning how to make a company, it's a long it's a long run. You need to learn many other things, not just research. You need to learn how to manage people. You need to learn how to raise funding. You need to learn how to pay the bills, of course. So it's something very different than just being in a lab.
But I suppose that I've been here in Boston several days, more than a year, but since I arrived, I have heard all the time how important the ecosystem on innovation is. Would you agree that what you're doing probably would have not been able, you would have not been able to do it probably in many other places, that it is precisely in the ecosystem of innovation here that really pushes you to these new adventures?
Yes, I really think that actually the ecosystem here is pretty unique. We are in the biotech capital of the world, here in Boston. Of course, there's a lot of opportunities. We have great institutions like MIT and Harvard that push innovation all the time. And because we have this amazing ecosystem, a lot of investors are actually in the area, and they are really willing to risk some of the capital to push some of the most innovative ideas in this field. So I really think that there's a competitive advantage of being in Boston. There's other very interesting cities for biotech in the US. For example, San Diego is one of it. Austin is starting to become a biotech hub too. But so far, I really believe that it's hard to have this ecosystem in other parts of the world. But hopefully, in Mexico, we're going to be able to build a similar ecosystem hopefully in Mexico City or Guadalajara, Monterrey, or other of the cities to push innovation and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it also matters to have a lot of people that have been entrepreneurs before, because then they can, they serve as mentors. I feel like Mexico already has a lot of very smart, very brilliant people. Mexico has a lot of talent, and definitely across the board, like in science, in engineering. So I think that we already have a lot of that potential to get there. And I think probably where things can make a big difference is making available, of course, like more of the capital that can fund high risk, high growth startups, but also kind of connecting to people who are already entrepreneurs or who have done it before, because they can help you kind of with that steep learning curve of everything that only if you've gone through it, you kind of, know what it's about.
Now, since March, our life in Boston changed dramatically, mid-March, and we have been almost 4 months where the economy stopped in many ways, learning social distancing. And I know that in particular, your two companies have been able to find COVID has been terrible for those that have been sick. It has been different for teachers having to learn how to teach through Zoom. But I understand that both of you have been able to find an opportunity in COVID to precisely do what you were doing, but more specifically to solve one or several problems that have arisen with this terrible pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you were doing changed, and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, in our case, Biobot is a public health company. So before COVID-19, we were already present across 8 different municipalities in the US, looking at the concentration of different types of opioids. Like these are, substances, drugs that have driven a lot of overdose deaths in the country over the past decade. So we were kind of getting ready to scale that product. The company was still pretty early on. We were, 5 employees working on the opioid product. And then COVID-19 hit. And very quickly we knew that we had to leverage our expertise, our technology to present a solution, because this was a big problem, and a problem that was going to be with us for a long time. So we decided to basically refocus all of our energy into creating a COVID-19 test program where municipalities, cities, states, counties can submit wastewater samples to us, and we look for the concentration of the novel coronavirus in the wastewater to understand how many people are infected in that area. And that's possible because basically the virus is shedding stool of people who are sick with it. So we can actually understand the scope of the outbreak through the wastewater. And it's just been an insane ride because, in the middle of going through the lockdown and all of the social distancing, our team already grew from 5 people to 20 people.
Wow.
We went from having, 8 customers to having 400 customers.
Ah, fantastic.
In a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
Yes. And, just like, and the R&D also was just super accelerated to the point where, now we can, we can detect the virus, we can quantify it. Now we know how to use that information to predict how many new cases you will see within 5 to 7 days after the sample is taken. Wow. So we've taken it to the point where now it's actually predictive of what's going to happen. So we, and we continue to scale.
And
so
your 400 clients are in the US, or have you been taking also studies from other parts of the world?
Yes, yeah. So we have nearly 400 customers within the US that represent 10% of the US population. So we're testing basically the pool from 10% of the US population. You know, as a comparison, actually clinical testing has only covered about 1 to 2% of the US population. So we have massive testing at scale here. And we have also now closed partnerships and started to receive samples from Pachuca in Hidalgo, looking at wastewater collected within their state, but also wastewater that is coming from Mexico City, which I think will be super interesting. We haven't seen the first results yet. They are almost ready to send the samples back to us. But yeah, we have Mexico and we have several Canadian cities, and we are in conversation with a few other Latin American countries.
Wow, so it's been an explosion, totally.
An explosion. I kid you not, that there are many of our new employees that we've never seen each other in person. The full hiring process and everything we do is remote. So unless you are physically going into the lab, everybody's still working from home.
Wow. And Guillermo, I understand that you're developing nanotechnologies for airports and public transportation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the concerns that actually a lot of people had and governments was the transmission of COVID through surfaces. I can tell you that transmission from surfaces is just very little percentage from the real transmission that happens with COVID, but still is a concern. Nevertheless, so there's people that is interested in some technologies that might protect some of the surfaces against COVID and also against other bacteria. So we got called by some people of the government to see if we could develop a solution to protect the public transportation and also airport, specifically surfaces, because right now the way they are cleaning most of the surfaces is by spraying a specific liquid that is going to be very effective for killing viruses and bacteria. Nevertheless, the issue that they have is that they have to disinfect the surface multiple times a day, and that's something that it's not very feasible, and it's not so easy. So what we actually have developed is a nanotechnology that is basically kind of a spray that when you spray it into a surface, is going to make a coating like a transparent film that is going to last for days, not just for 1-2 hours. And then what's going to happen is that this film has antiviral and antibacterial properties. So when the virus or when the bacteria actually is deposited into the surface of that film, is going to be inactivated. So that's something that is kind of useful for many use cases, not just public transportation. It could also be applied for example, public spaces like libraries, banks, or even in the house. It could have many implications. So we have developed this film-based technology that is pretty easy to use. And so far we are actually in conversations with multiple people. Actually in Mexico, we're trying to send some of this technology to see if this can be helpful in some way. But similar to Mariana, we actually had to accelerate a lot the R&D, because originally we had this antimicrobial platform technology for other applications that were totally different. But then we had to do some fast innovation to readapt the technology and reconfigure it so it could be useful for this use case. So that's exactly what we have developed. Actually, it's something that hopefully is going to help, but I just want to make sure about something. This technology is just kind of it can assist in COVID transmission, but it's not the solution to COVID. It's not that, because this kind of technology can be implemented in a metro or in a bus station or in the airport. Is going to totally prevent COVID or something similar, because the main route of transmission is still person to person, right? So then that's something very, very important to clarify.
Yeah, it will prevent that if you touch a rail in the metro that maybe you don't pick it, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. And Guillermo, you're developing the technology, but would you produce for it also the spray, or you would sell that technology for someone that would produce it?
No, it's already like we already developed the technology. Mm-hmm. So right now we are actually in conversations to use the technology already in some of the public transportation of some cities. But then we hope this can be implemented pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's amazing. It's fantastic to hear how you've been able to really make the most of a very difficult time. Yeah. And something that also I want to acknowledge and thank is that you, even though you have chosen to live here in Boston for almost a decade, both of you, that you're still very connected with Mexico. You're interested in having that linkage and you know, be able to develop also technology and entrepreneurs in Mexico. But I know, Guillermo, through all the students that come every year from the Tec de Monterrey to your labs, that much of the interest is precisely helping Mexico have, as Mariana had mentioned earlier, a broader and more active innovation ecosystem too. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about
definitely
connections with Mexico?
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, we established this program with specifically with Tecnológico de Monterrey around 4 years ago. So we have received a lot of students, around 300 or almost 400 students in these 4 years, where they've been able to learn a lot of different technologies that we are developing at Harvard Medical School. They actually stay for a period of 6 months to 1 year, which is pretty good for them. And then also we use that as a bridge to collaborate. For example, we have established a lot of very interesting projects with some researchers at Monterrey. And we hope this interaction can be helpful to also transfer some knowledge that they could implement to innovate and create new platforms in Mexico. And as a personal thing also, during the last weeks, I've been also very, very in touch with Mexico, because I've been participating in this Center for COVID Innovation that was formed by Mass General Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital, of course, with Harvard Medical School as a response center to this crisis. And in that center, I was actually involved in one of the groups where we were analyzing and identifying opportunities for deploying a lot of digital technologies that could be useful for this pandemic. And through this center, we have learned a lot. We have actually identified a lot of opportunities, a lot of strategies. And I have been able to take some of those strategies and transfer them to Mexico, at least to some governments that right now I know that they have been using them. Some of that information has been actually extremely useful for a lot of the authorities. So I'm trying to serve as kind of a link to transfer this knowledge. So hopefully they're going to be able to respond in our country too.
Great, thank you, Guillermo. What about you, Mariana? Do you want to add a little more?
Yeah, I think that you know, when you have, for example, a startup, your time, your bandwidth, your resources are limited. So you have to actually choose almost like, you know, what type of customers you want to be providing your service to. And I think that's where also it matters so much that in this case, for example, I am Mexican, I care about giving back to my country, I care about supporting the country. So even though like literally like, you know, space is limited, like we're not providing our service to more customers because we don't have more bandwidth. Like we're capped by capacity, not by demand. Even in that scenario, we made the space to be able to work with Mexican cities in this program. And I think that, you know, that's something that I care about and that you have to be very intentional about. Like otherwise, you know, if I was just a random other person, maybe I wouldn't have thought about working with necessarily giving priority to Mexican cities to participate. But that's an advantage of having Mexicans abroad, is that, you know, you can start linking like those opportunities, and you know that you will always care about your country and their well-being and trying to help out.
Yeah, well, and you have shown how much you care by giving us all your time, with as busy as you are, to take this hour to precisely share your experience with us is really fantastic. So thank you so much. As you know, the consulate has tried to has created an area of innovation several years ago. Paulina Ramirez is in charge. And what we try is to connect precisely, help you connect. Sometimes we can help, sometimes we can't, but at least make sure that your stories are told and are known in Mexico. And so thanks again for accepting to share with us this experience, to be the first guys of the Mexican professional leaders in New England to be part of this series. And I'm sure that we will be continuing in touch, because we have been in touch all this time. So thanks again very much. Gracias, Paulina, also for putting together this program.
No, thank you very much to you. Thank you for the invitation, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, all of you, for participating. I think that the discussion today was really interesting, and it's nice to hear that we have really talented Mexicans abroad working in these projects that sometimes we cannot even imagine. Nanotechnology and the sewage testing, it's just like something that hearing about it sounds incredible. But thank you so much, and thank you so much, Consul General, for guiding us through this conversation.
Okay. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone that connected today. Hopefully you can join us next time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.